Right, let's jump into another deep dive. I was going through the source material you sent over, and, well, this one is something else.
Definitely thought-provoking. Right.
For sure. It's this concept called the Christian economy.
Yeah.
I mean, where do we even start with that?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that this isn't just some tweak to like capitalism or socialism.
Okay, yeah.
This is presented as a total replacement.
Whoa, a whole new system.
Yeah, for a specific community, at least as it's laid out here. And get this, it's built around this idea that AI and robots, they do all the work.
Hold on. Like, all the work. So nobody has jobs.
That's the idea. Resources are just freely available, everyone gets what they need, and humans are freed from, the daily grind.
Okay, but like, what would people even do all day? I mean, it sounds kind of utopian,
Yeah.
but also kind of boring.
Right. That's one of the big questions the source material tries to grapple with. Like, what happens to human purpose when you don't need to work to survive?
Right, because right now it feels like so much of our identity is tied to our jobs.
Exactly. So the source material, it envisions this society where people, they're free to focus on things like community service, creative pursuits, personal growth, stuff like that.
Hmm. So, like, everyone becomes a volunteer. How do they make sure people actually contribute, though?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. The core principle of this whole system, it's love, they say.
Love. Okay, that sounds nice, but how does that actually work,
Yeah.
practically speaking?
So the argument is that within this community, people would be like intrinsically motivated to contribute. It's not about working for a paycheck, but about working to meet the needs of others, especially those who need it most.
So instead of like every man for himself, is more like all for one and one for all.
Yeah, cooperation over competition. That's the big idea.
I mean, I get it. That's a lovely thought. But, look at the world. Everything's about competition. Business, sports, even like getting into a good school.
For sure. And the source material actually calls that out. It argues that capitalism, by its nature, kind of fosters this borderline enemy mentality.
Borderline enemy. Interesting. So in this Christian economy, they think cooperation is the key to, like, everything, from innovation to taking care of each other.
That's the proposal, yeah. It's about shifting the entire mindset. Instead of what's in it for me, it's how can I contribute?
Makes you think, Like, is that even possible on a large scale to just completely change how we think about, well, everything?
Right. I mean, it's definitely a radical departure from, everything we're used to.
Definitely. So let's break this down a little more. When they say love is the driving force, what does that actually look like? Can you give me some concrete examples?
Sure. Like, think about healthcare in this system. Instead of being profit-driven, it's all about care, compassion, genuine healing. Doctors and nurses motivated by a desire to truly help people.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. But what about things like, building houses or developing new technology? Those are pretty complex tasks.
The source material dives into that a bit. They talk about talent sharing, where everyone contributes their skills and knowledge to benefit the community. And AI helps match those skills to where they're needed. So you'd have people building homes because they're passionate about construction, not just for a paycheck.
That makes sense. But how do you prevent, like, abuse? What if someone just doesn't pull their weight?
Well, they talk about this being a voluntary system. You choose to be part of this community, and if you don't uphold the values, you can leave.
So there's freedom built into the system.
Exactly. And they argue that this freedom, combined with the shared values and beliefs, would naturally foster a culture of trust and accountability.
Hmm. So it's like a social contract, but based on, like, spiritual principles rather than legal ones.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. It relies heavily on the idea that people inherently want to contribute and do good when they're in the right environment.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, and I have, like, a million more questions. But this love thing, it's really the crux of the matter, isn't it?
It is. It's the foundation upon which this entire Christian economy is built.
All right, well, let's dig into that some more. I want to know how this love actually plays out in practice. What are the nuts and bolts of this system? How do they make sure it actually works? So we were talking about love being like the engine of this whole Christian economy thing, but, love is great and all, but how do things actually get done?
Right, like how do you match skills to needs, make sure stuff's high quality, all that practical stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they actually have some pretty interesting ideas about that. Like, they talk about community-wide talent assessments.
Talent assessment. So, like, everyone takes a test to figure out what they're good at.
Kind of, but it's more about identifying your passions and what you enjoy doing, not just what you're, like, technically skilled at.
Okay, so it's not just about, can you do this?
Yeah.
But also, do you want to do this?
Exactly. They believe that's key to making the whole system work. And get this, AI plays a big role here.
AI for talent assessments.
Not just for the assessments, but for actually matching those skills and passions to what the community needs.
Okay, I'm intrigued. So, like, how would that work?
Imagine like an algorithm that knows who's amazing at baking, who loves gardening, who's great with kids, and then it connects those people to where their skills are needed most.
So instead of applying for jobs, you're basically saying, hey, here's what I love to do. How can I help out?
Yeah, pretty much. It flips the whole employment model on its head.
Okay, that makes sense for stuff like, child care or elder care, maybe even teaching. But what about more specialized fields? Like if someone needs brain surgery, you're going to have AI picking the surgeon based on who says they love medicine.
Huh. That's a good point. And to be honest, the source material is a bit vague on those really specialized, highly technical skills. They do mention like mentorship programs and specialized training within the community, though. So presumably, even brain surgeons would find their place.
I guess so. But even with those specialized roles, how do you make sure the quality is good? Like in our current system, you've got certifications, licenses, all these ways to kind of verify someone's competence.
Yeah.
How does this system do it?
That's where community feedback comes in. It's not just about AI matching skills, but about ongoing evaluation and like peer review.
So it's kind of like online ratings, but for everything.
Yeah, kind of, but within a close-knit community where your reputation really matters.
Makes sense. So accountability comes from the community itself, not from some like higher up or authority figure.
Yep. It's all about trust, transparency, and this shared understanding of what good looks like.
Okay, so let's say someone's baking isn't up to par, or a house gets built poorly. How do they deal with disagreements or disputes? Because it's got to happen, right?
Oh, absolutely. And for that, they have these things called community councils.
Community councils.
Yeah.
Sounds kind of official.
Well, they're elected by the community, and their job is to, like, mediate conflicts and find fair resolutions.
So instead of lawsuits and court battles, it's more like sitting down and talking things out.
Exactly. It's a much more collaborative approach to conflict resolution.
I mean, that sounds great in theory, but does it actually work? Human nature. Sometimes people just can't agree.
Right, and the source material acknowledges that, but they argue that because the whole system is based on this idea of love and forgiveness, people are more likely to approach conflict with like a spirit of understanding.
It's a big leap of faith, that's for sure. But I guess that's kind of the whole point of this Christian economy thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. It's about trusting in the power of shared values and this belief that at our core, humans are good and do want to contribute.
Okay, so I'm starting to get how this system works within this specific community, but how does it scale? Like, could this actually work on a larger scale for a whole country even?
That's a big question, and honestly, the source material doesn't really address it. It's very focused on this specific, relatively small community.
So it works because everyone's on the same page, shares the same beliefs, all that.
That seems to be the assumption, yeah. Whether it could work in a more diverse, more complex society, that's definitely up for debate.
Right. Because even within this community, I'm sure there are disagreements, different interpretations of what love means, all that.
Oh, for sure. And that's where those community councils probably come in handy to navigate those differences and find common ground.
Makes sense. Earlier we talked about how the source material is pretty critical of socialism and communism. Called them systems of slavery even. Strong words.
Yeah, very strong. But the core concern seems to be about individual freedom being, like, stifled in those systems.
Right. So how does this Christian economy deal with that concern? Because it seems pretty structured. Lots of rules, community oversight.
That's where the voluntary aspect is so important. The source material really stresses that people are free to join or leave this community at any time, no strings attached.
So it's like a free market of communities. You choose the one that best fits your values, your lifestyle, all that.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. It implies that different economic models could coexist, each attracting people who resonate with its particular principles.
That's kind of a mind-blowing concept when you think about it. Like, instead of trying to impose one system on everyone, you let people self-select into communities that align with their beliefs.
It's definitely a different way of thinking about how society could be organized.
It is. It's making me rethink a lot of my assumptions, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it all comes back to this fundamental question, doesn't it? What do we want our economy to be motivated by?
Exactly. Is it profit, power, individual gain? Or is there another way, a way that prioritizes things like love, community, and the common good?
And that's the challenge this Christian economy model throws down, isn't it? It asks us to imagine a world where those things are the driving forces of our economic system.
It does. It's a radical idea, but it forces us to ask some really important questions about what we value and what kind of society we want to create.
You know, it's really got me thinking about all this whole Christian economy thing. Like, we've talked about how it works, the role of AI, the community aspect, but I keep coming back to this idea of love as an actual economic force. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's definitely not how we usually think about economics.
Not at all. It's always about scarcity, competition, maximizing profit.
Mm-hmm.
But this model is saying, hey, what if we built a system around something completely different?
Right. And even though the source material frames it within this specific religious context, the core idea is something that, well, I think a lot of people could connect with.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, regardless of your beliefs, who wouldn't want an economy that's driven by something like love, compassion, actually caring for each other?
It definitely taps into a very human desire for connection, purpose, a sense of belonging. It's like the opposite of that dog-eat-dog mentality we see so much of these days.
Right. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the source material's critique of socialism and communism.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
It's harsh language for sure, but the underlying concern seems to be about individual freedom, right? Like being forced into a system you don't agree with.
Exactly. But in this Christian economy, it's all about voluntary participation. You choose to be part of it.
And that's a big difference, right? It's not about the government dictating how things work. It's about people coming together freely based on shared values.
Precisely. The source material argues that true freedom is about choosing to contribute, not being forced to. And when people feel genuinely connected to a community, invested in its well-being, that's when you get the most enthusiastic, the most meaningful participation.
So it's not just about escaping the 9-to-5 grind. It's about finding work that actually matters to you, that allows you to use your skills to make a real difference in the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's about seeing work not as a chore, but as an act of service, an expression of love for your community.
It almost feels like a totally different definition of success, not about money or status, but about the positive impact you have on others.
Right. It challenges us to think about what truly matters in life. Like, what kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? What kind of world do we want to create for future generations?
Those are big questions. And this source material, it doesn't pretend to have all the answers.
Yeah.
But it definitely makes you think.
Oh, absolutely. It challenges so many of our assumptions about how an economy should function, what motivates people, even what success really means.
Right. And it reminds us that we have choices. We don't have to just accept the systems that are already in place. We can imagine new possibilities, new ways of organizing our lives that are more just, more equitable, more loving.
Couldn't have said it better myself. At the end of the day, I think that's the biggest takeaway from this deep dive. It's about opening our minds to new ideas, questioning the status quo, and daring to imagine a better future.
Well said. And on that note, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Christian economy. It's been quite a journey, and I hope it's left you with some food for thought.
Always a pleasure diving deep with you. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep imagining.